Welcome to another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Alan Saunders. That's Derrick Bell. Zachary Smith is at the eye doctor so that he doesn't have to look like Chris Farley from a 1980s episode of SNL next week. But I hope he just comes back looking like the Terminator or something else. I don't know, maybe we'll just keep it going. But I hope everything is going well for Zach. Derrick, what's up, man? I feel like it's been a while since you and I got to talk some ball, some actually we'll miss Smitty, but I'm excited to get into this and talk some ball.
Yeah, it's been a little bit since I think it was you and I on the afternoon drive. I want to say probably like a pregame show or something like that. I think last year was the last time I was on here.
It's been a long time, and even just like then, like I feel like you and I haven't talked about the team a lot, just you and I. So I'm pretty fired up about this. The first thing I want to talk about is Mike Tomlin. The big news yesterday was that he gets the 3-year contract extension. Smitty and I talked about it a lot in yesterday's episode, so you can check that out. One episode up here on the YouTube channel or in your podcast stream. But I just want to get your thoughts on extending Mike Tomlin at this point in his career and maybe about the job he's done these last couple seasons.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that this was definitely a move that I have and many others probably expected to happen. I mean, he was going into last year of his deal. This doesn't really make sense, in my opinion, to just leave him in that predicament. It's not good for the organization, not good for the team, not good for the coach. So, I mean, I know this is going to sound like controversial, but I think multiple things like can and often are true, right? Like I think one of the things that I've often said about Tomlin is I feel like he's one of the best like floor raising coaches, not just in football, but in all of sports. I mean, you look at some of the ways that he's been able to help this team, stay afloat. Just in recent years, it's been really impressive. This has been a team in transition for several seasons. Now you look at, you've had some stars getting older. You move on from a Hall of Fame quarterback. And then, like, I think there are some valid concerns in terms of, like, the lack of postseason success. And I think from a fan perspective, it totally makes sense to be really anxious about that aspect of it. But at the same time, like, I don't think that anyone thinking in their rational mind, like, really truly believes that he's not a top 5 or at least a top 10 head coach in the NFL right now. And to me, that's worth investing in. And, the big thing, like, I still think back to, like, what Art Rooney said in the offseason. Just talking about, they want to show some urgency. They want to make sure they get back to winning in the postseason. But at the same time, he feels like Tomlin's message is still being well received by the team, especially with a lot of the young players. And I think that resonates with me personally. And I just think that, with talking to, in the limited time I've had the chance to, and talking with guys on the team, there's so many people that, are really excited about the prospect of just playing for him. And he's a big reason why some guys end up coming over to the Steelers, talking to draft picks, talking to, free agents, things like that. And I still think that that's really valuable, even if I do acknowledge, that the lack of postseason success is concerning. And I understand the frustration surrounding that.
I think the one area that it's pretty fair to criticize him is that, the last couple offensive coordinator hires have not gone very well. I don't think that, clearly, I mean, Todd Haley did some good things and they put up some good numbers, but they couldn't make the personalities work. Randy Figner, it was an okay couple of years, but it was nothing special. Matt Canada clearly, was a bad choice, and a bad choice they stuck with. I think if you're like, I think the focus on the playoffs, it's like, look, those last 2 years they lost the playoffs. Like, they were not even close to competitive with those teams. Like, it wasn't even realistic to win one of those games. They probably should have beat the Browns in 2020. But, like, if I was a person that was like, what's Mike Tomlin really under fire for in 2024? It's not go win a playoff game. It's get this offensive coordinator hire right. Like, I think that's so much more important than winning one playoff game. Is like, is Arthur Smith finally the answer at that spot where they've had a pretty long-term struggle? And I don't know what you think so far about what Arthur Smith's brought in. I know he was a guy that people were mixed on, when he was hired. I don't think he was like unanimously loved as a candidate, but I've been pretty impressed so far with just him and his makeup. But are you with me that that's like a pretty crucial hire for Tomlin and this team to get right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was. I want to say it was the week after the season ended. I wrote an article for the site, and I was talking about, this was really an extremely pivotal point in the direction of the franchise. Like, this is before everything kind of transpired. But one thing that I talked about is like they have to get serious about getting an offensive coordinator in there that's qualified and then upgrading the quarterback play. Like those two things were very clearly anchors to the 2023 Steelers for the most part. And really, you can extend that beyond. But look, I mean, even the lack of postseason success, right? Like there's definitely enough frustration around there, but at the same time, like you mentioned, like, were they better than the Bills? No. Were they better than the Chiefs? No. I think one of the things specifically that has, bothered me a little bit in the past is, Tomlin does have his fingerprints a lot on the defense, and I think it's fair to be really frustrated at some of the performances, really from the team, but from that side of the ball in some of these bigger games against better quarterbacks. Like you look, I mean, they've been historically not just bad on defense in the playoffs, but they've been historically bad, man. Like 45 to the Jags in 2017, 48 to the Browns in 2020, 42 to the Chiefs, 31 to the Bills, and like a couple of these last couple games, like you mentioned, the talent level wasn't really even, but at the same time, like opposing teams kind of let off because they were blowouts. But at the same time, I still think, him getting there is still, worth acknowledging because the talent level like wasn't what we're accustomed to seeing from playoff teams in Pittsburgh. It's just the NFL is such a quarterbacks league and it's such an offensive driven league that you make a good point about, the offensive coordinator is that's the most important hire that Tomlin's ever had to make. Like that's something that I wrote after the season ended. He needed to nail this. And over the past several months, like I've been doing deep dives on Arthur Smith's offense. So I'm uncertain on if it's actually going to work, but I at least understand the vision on why they did what they did. And I'm cautiously optimistic that it's at least going to be better than what it's been because the Matt Canada hire, you mentioned like just a bad hire in general. The hire just made absolutely no sense from day one, and then the decision to stick with him going into last season, I mean, that was just an organizational failure from really all levels. And but yeah, I mean, I think that just listening to you guys reporting on him on a day-to-day basis, like a couple of times that we've heard him talk, I've been encouraged. Like he said that today that he was putting his ego aside in terms of going from head coach to offensive coordinator again, and that was one of the things that people in Atlanta were, you know, loud about the fact that there was some ego stuff in their locker room, but I'm optimistic that things are going to be better starting next year.
Well, I've been at OTAs at the first day of mini camp today. You haven't been around the team, obviously. What do you want to know about what the Steelers offense looks like? I don't know if I can tell you everything I've seen, but I can tell you a good bit. Like, what to you is important at this time of year? What are you interested to see?
Yeah, I mean, I think once you get into mini camp and training camp, the early portions of it, to me, it's like I think you could tell a lot about a team in terms of like what their day one, day two, day three install stuff looks like from a passing game standpoint, from a run game standpoint. Because even like preseason, like I know from a fan perspective, everybody hates preseason because it's like you don't get to see the stars play. Like you're seeing a lot of backups play and stuff like that. But really, like preseason's it's kind of good because you can see like the bare bones of like what the playbook's going to look like, and you can see a lot of different. It's vanilla, but you can see a lot of the core concepts that they're going to be relying on. So it's a good foreshadowing experience. But I think beyond just like the schematic standpoint, that's something I'm looking forward to seeing in training camp. Hopefully, I'm really just intrigued by like how some of these positional breakdowns are going to look at like. What does the rotation look like from the receivers? Is this going to be a true mix and match situation in terms of like who's playing outside, who's playing in the slot? Is it going to be, dependent on concept? Is it going to be like a heavy rotation? It's kind of same thing with like the slot cornerback stuff. Is Sutton going to be the 3-down guy? That's not really what he's been in the slot in the past, but is he going to play on early downs as well? Or are they going to mix and match kind of like they've had to do a little bit in years past there as well? So I think those are the bigger questions to me from a personnel standpoint.
Let's see. I can try to tackle some of that. The wide receiver mix has been a mix. I mean, I think I saw
Yeah.
Marquez Callaway out there with the one. Yeah, a true mix. And I talked to Justin Fields last week, and he said basically it's on purpose. Like they're just trying to get all the wide receivers reps with all the quarterbacks and reps in all the spots. So, like I think Roman Wilson is a guy who, like, if I'm trying to jumpstart him as a rookie, like I'm trying to play him in the slot or in other places where I can get him free releases, right? Like, but he's still going out there and taking reps at all the spots. Like they're just moving everybody around. So like I'm not really sure in that room how much we've really learned about what they're trying to do, because it just feels like they're just trying to spread it around and get everybody everywhere a little bit. I will say the one thing is, like, Calvin Austin to me is the guy that maybe got put in some of those like situations that maybe don't look natural to his skill set or that he hasn't done before, and really thrived. Like I would not look at Calvin Austin and be like, "Oh, that's a red zone weapon," but he's actually looked really good, in like that area, and given some greater responsibilities. I think he's one of the guys that's really taken it and run with it, which has been really interesting to me because I always really liked Calvin as a prospect. I wrote a good story about him at the Senior Bowl, at the Combine, and I was like, yeah, I love this guy. And then I think like the fan base kind of like got over its skis about how good he might be, and now I feel like it's come back around. Like he's kind of the forgotten guy in that wide receiver room now, almost like it's not the shiny new toy anymore. I think he's a guy that could be a good fit in this offense, just because they do have the ability to get free releases in a number of different ways. And that's something at his size, obviously, big benefit. On the other side, slot corner, man, Beanie Bishop really impresses me every day. Like, he is just a guy that I think really understands football. He understands his role. He doesn't make mistakes. Like, for a rookie, he does not make mistakes. Like, I have not seen him with a busted coverage or, like, every day I'm watching a rookie where some vet has to come over and put his arm around his shoulder, grab him by the face mask, and be like, no, dude, you're supposed to do it this way. You just don't see it with Beanie Bishop. Like, he is a small dude. He is going to be, for his career, limited in terms of the things he's able to do on the football field because of that. But, like, I think he looks ready to go right now. Like, I think so when you're talking about, like, I'm very interested in Cam Sutton, not only – like that everybody's unsure about what's going to happen in terms of a suspension, but like you're saying, like Cam Sutton was a third down nickel or a pass down nickel, whatever you want to call it. He wasn't playing nickel on 1st and 10 very often. I think there's a role there for Beanie or for a guy like Josiah Scott or someone else to claim. And I think Beanie's done a really nice job of it. So I think those are some spots. I think the tackle position is fascinating to me. I love the conversation about, oh my God, you can't move guys from their position, and I don't know. I think a lot of that's overblown. I'm pretty comfortable with Troy Fautanu playing right tackle. I think I would be okay with Braddock Jones playing right tackle too. I don't think there's a way it has to work out. They got both of those guys doing both. Is there in your mind a way that you would like that to play out, or do you think they can have the luxury to kind of see how things shake out?
Yeah, I mean, and this is something that I feel like a topic of conversation it's going to be a thing until like we have the final answer, and I can see both sides of it. I mean, man, to me, you drafted two back-to-back left tackles in college. Not both of them can play left tackle on your team. Like someone's going to have to switch positions, and it just is what it is. Now, I'm definitely one of those people that talks a lot about the fact that not everybody can do it. I think that's it's really a case by case basis, man. You got to see who's comfortable doing it, and that's why I think it does probably make sense to have all of those guys get reps left and right, because you want to see roll the ball out, see who deserves to start. You got Dan Moore Jr. You got a guy who's played 3 consecutive seasons as a starting left tackle. Granted, I think that we can acknowledge that there was probably some intention behind trying to upgrade over him and his skill set. But at the same time, finding the best match of those 2 tackles and seeing if one of those guys can get acclimated well enough on the right side to where they can play early on and play week 1 potentially is a good thing for me. So I always kind of initially after they drafted Fautanu, I said that I would probably leave him at left and leave Broderick at right, because it just makes more sense to me. I think normally, you want your best pass protecting left tackle or pass protecting tackle on the left side, and but I mean, I think you can make that argument both ways. And to me, Fautanu was just more of a ready prospect. I liked him more as a prospect coming out, so that's probably where my bias kind of lied. But really indifferent in terms of like how it works out. I'm just really cautiously optimistic that they're going to be able to get good play out of both of these guys. And I think it's going to be, the tackle position is going to be really interesting just in terms of how it's evaluated and how the fan base kind of views these guys, because this system, one of the things that the coaches from this system really talk a lot about is like limiting the exposure to the offensive linemen and like true pass sets. So they're going to be really run heavy. They're going to do a lot of things in terms of, play action, not just off the outside zone stuff, but you're going to see a lot of nakeds, a lot of keepers, things like that are going to, it's going to take some stress off the tackles. But at the same time, it's going to be a little bit difficult because, regardless of which one of these guys is back at quarterback, like Justin or Russell, both those guys like to hold the ball for a long time. And they
half as many true pass sets, but they all last 4 seconds.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's going to be difficult, man. Like, if you just look at like time to throw, I think we've gotten a little bit, like you mentioned, getting over your skis. Like, I think we've gotten a little bit over our skis a little bit in terms of like how we evaluate that statistic. But at the same time, like, there's no doubt when you watch these guys play, whether it's Russell, whether it's Justin, they're going to take sacks. They're going to hold on to the ball. They're playmakers. They like to scramble. They like to get outside, hold on to the ball in terms of trying to create some explosive plays down the field. So those situations are going to be difficult on them. Now, again, I think if like we talk about the Steelers' formula for 2024 is to run the ball efficiently and then get the explosives in the pass game, right? But they're going to be a heavy game script team, and I think when you look at the Steelers over the last several years, like they've got a negative point differential, but they've been able to make the playoffs because they've been able to keep some of these games close, dirty them up, and then come away with it at the very end. I think even when you look at a guy like Russell, if you can keep positive game scripts to where you don't have to abandon the run, you don't have to get in a bunch of pure drop back situations. You can keep it close on the end. And like one of the underrated parts about Russell specifically is he's still like he had some really good moments last year in terms of like game-winning drives, fourth quarter, some of the stuff that I feel like the fan base praised Kenny Pickett for last year and the year before was that the offense looked like total crap for three and a half quarters, and then they look good, or he looked good in the final drive or two. Like Russ had some of those same moments for Denver. So I think if they could just keep games close, there might be a formula there for them to make the playoffs, and we'll see who they get as an opponent.
Talking about Russ and Justin Fields, and I think a lot of people have some preconceived notions about who they think is going to play. And talking to Tom Arth today for the first time was really good to talk to him. Man, he's a really bright guy. I was really impressed with our conversation, and we're talking about that deal, that competition, and I thought it was really funny the way he's like, you can't stop these guys from competing whether you want them to or not.
Right.
Like you're gonna have a competition. And he said, and like the things that happen on the open field in St. Vincent, like even if the Steelers wanted there to not be a competition, if Justin Fields is going out there training camp and he's going full bore and he's doing everything he can to make this team and he looks really good, people are going to know. Like, we're going to write about it. There's going to be video. There's going to be people in the stands talking to their friends about it. Like, you can't hide, like, good quarterback play. So I think there is going to be a real competition. And from, like, an X's and O's standpoint, man, like, I think there's a lot of reasons for the Steelers to want Justin Fields to win this job. Like, Russell Wilson, I'm totally on board with your thoughts about him being, like, a fourth-quarter quarterback and a guy who probably has, like, he has some turnovers, but it seems like he has a better sense of like, oh, this is like lock it up fourth quarter. Like, he knows when to take risks, I think, a little bit more intelligently. But like, there's some stuff that he doesn't do that well that have been big parts of what Arthur Smith has done before. It's like throwing the ball over the middle. And I don't know. I think Justin Fields maybe, like, if you just want to run the ball and take deep shots and, run play action and run with your quarterback, man, he can do all that. I'm really curious to see how this plays out.
Yeah, I think you make a good point too. And this is something that, I talked a lot about in various mediums last year towards the end of the season when Mason Rudolph was coming in. And I think it's important, like you mentioned, like the fans can see it in training camp settings. Like if they go out there and like, Justin's clearly leading the competition or he's lighting it up, whatever, the fans can see it. But I think it's important to note that the players themselves, they can feel that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, and I think that's a big reason that the Steelers overhauled their quarterback room. Like, I think that you have to have buy-in from your entire team. The team has to believe in the quarterback because that it's the most important position in all the sports. Like, if you've got a guy back there that, there's a lot of guys in the locker room that they just don't believe he's that guy. Um, that's a scary thing. Like, that's not something you want to roll into the season with. And I think with Russ, like his pedigree, kind of speaks for itself. I know things didn't work out in Denver for various reasons, and I'm still, I think that there are some things kind of dwindling in his skill set that bring some cause for concern. But I still think that he can provide you solid, maybe average starting quarterback play if everything goes perfectly. You mentioned like Justin and the things that he could do and the way that it makes the offense different, and that's part of the reason why I'm a little bit more just from a curiosity standpoint. I am a little bit more curious about what the offense would look like with Justin, mainly just because I just think that when you're a run heavy team and having a athlete, like I really do believe that Justin's one of the best athletes we've ever seen at the quarterback position. Like he's a top 3, top 5 guy all time. We've never seen a guy that's that big, can run. Like we've just very rarely seen guys that are that big, that fast, and can run the ball the way he can. And, is there a ton of room for development as a passer? Absolutely. Like he does some stuff that'll absolutely make you want to tear your eyes out. But at the same time, like he's going to make 2 to 3 plays a game that are going to pull you back in and say, man, this kid, like he can do things that very few can. And, one thing that I think the biggest question for me, and we won't have an answer to this, in my opinion, during training camp and during the preseason, because it would be really stupid for them to show their cards this early. But I want to know if Arthur Smith expands the quarterback run game stuff with Justin, not just in terms of like, is he going to have a package in the red zone or short yardage or something like that. But in the event that Justin does start this year, I want to see him lean into more like he does a lot of zone read stuff, especially in the red zone. He did it with Tannehill, he did it with Mariota, Ritter. But I want to see like him lean into like even more stuff. Like with Justin, that's something that I think a lot of people in Chicago got frustrated with is there were glimpses of them leaning into like this robust quarterback run game where they're running a bunch of counter, a bunch of quarterback sweep. Like there's just so many different things that you can do power with him because he's such a gifted athlete. That's the thing. If Justin gets put in and he has to play, I want to see them like turn over every single stone. Like, I mean, like pure, like Greg Roman type stuff in terms of like the run game. Like you got to get really creative and take advantage of what he can do as a runner. And that's probably one of the things that I'm most looking forward to seeing, even if we probably won't get that until regular season if he does play.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some of that stuff go in, and I think the interesting part is like you don't want to do it as much because he's 35 years old, but like it's not like it's a waste to put those things in because you
Sure.
certainly could still call them with
Hmm.
Russell Wilson and a quarterback. Like you're not going to call a whole bunch of quarterback sweeps with Russell Wilson, but you get down to you need a 2 point conversion. Yeah, you could call that. Like like you could get yourself in a couple places where it makes sense. So I think it makes sense to have a lot of that stuff in and be putting it in now just because, like you said, if you got to play Justin Fields, why wouldn't you want to run him? I mean, man, he just like I've always known he was a great athlete, but I think my biggest takeaway from watching him at practice up close and personal is like the speed is so easy. Like
Hmm.
like you watch some people like Jalen Warren is fast, no doubt, but Jalen Warren runs like the road runner. Like his legs are just like churning and churning. It's like an effort. And Justin Fields is like you see him like looking downfield like he might want to run, and he takes 2 strides and he's gone 10 yards. And you're like, what happened? Like where
Yeah.
did he go? It's just so effortless. And I think it really you can do so much with that. If I was an offensive coordinator, I'd be begging to have a quarterback like Justin Fields. And I agree with you that like the plays that where he's going to make you want to pull your hair out are going to be bad. But I think the ability to be creative with what
Yeah.
he can do, to me, kind of overrides that in a lot of ways.
And
And Arthur Smith is known as a creative guy.
yeah. And I think another thing too, like just with bringing in Russell and bringing in Justin, it's kind of funny because, I've already seen it like in the YouTube comments of like your all's videos and some of my videos on YouTube as well. Like people already trying to like pick sides, like Team Russell, Team Justin. And I understand why that's the case. Like, people want to have their guy start or want to have their guy play. But the funny thing is, man, they got some of the same strengths and weaknesses as players. Like they're both going to take some sacks. Neither one of these guys have shown that over the course of their careers that they're going to test the middle of the field with regularity. Both these guys are really gifted deep ball throwers. Like Justin throws a beautiful ball. Russ is one of the best deep ball throwers, not just of his generation, but maybe all time, to be honest with you. So, I mean, there's a lot of similarities between the two guys. I think, with Justin, man, like you mentioned just the athleticism. I think the big thing for me is, you know, two things. One, how quickly he gets up to top speed. Like you mentioned, just
Yeah.
the lack of necessary steps to get to that top gear is very, very evident on film. But I think like the big difference between him and even some of the other like quote unquote dual threat guys that we've seen over the past like decade or two is when he cuts and like say he's moving laterally, he sticks that foot in the ground, like it is so fast, so explosive off that foot to where he can get vertical and get to that top speed so quickly. And I think, it just opens up so many different possibilities because when you talk about the quarterback run game stuff, you automatically gain a +1 advantage in the box. Like he's automatically going to be somebody that you got to account for, even on like, stuff such as like, zone read, or even if you want to run some power read or counter stuff, like the defense is always going to have to account for him in the box. And like when you want to be like a running team, like there are advantages to having a guy back there that is going to command attention. And like that's some of the reason, like even a guy like Lamar, and I'm not trying to compare, even Justin to Lamar, because Lamar's just he's two-time MVP. He's in a different stratosphere right now. But like some of the reasons why Baltimore has been able to get so much success out of, some of their running backs, despite not really having a high profile guy. I know they just signed, later day Derrick Henry, but it's because like anytime Baltimore wants to run the ball, you got to account for Lamar. He's always going to be priority number
Yeah.
one for a defense. So like you are going to be running with a +1 advantage all the time. And I think that you can see how that affects like how defenders have to pay attention to him, how much attention he commands. There's a
Oh
lot
my
of
God!
value
If
in
you,
that.
I mean, I know you know this, but like if you're watching the Steelers play the Ravens, go put on some highlights of Steelers Ravens
Yeah.
and watch. Anytime there's a mesh, watch the Steelers outside linebackers because they're just going to tackle the quarterback.
Yep.
They're not even looking to see where the ball goes. They're just going to tackle the quarterback. And like
Yep.
you that you're taking two defenders really. I mean, one on the play side, the backside one's out of the play anyway. Like you're taking sometimes the Steelers' best defender out of the play just because he's that worried about Lamar Jackson. I think the
Yeah.
ability to do that makes your running game so much better. I do
Yeah.
want to talk about the defense a little bit. We talked about the offense a lot, and I talked to TJ Watt a little bit today about what he's doing and his level of frustration, missing that playoff game with a minor injury, and I said like, is that a thing? Like, I mean, going back 2 years now, like he missed a lot of time in 2022. Cam and Minka missed a lot of time last year. Like, and they've had a good defense. Like they've
Mm-hmm.
been top 10 in scoring. They haven't been what I would call dominant, right? But they've been good. Well, it really does feel in a lot of ways like the thing holding them back the most has been their own health. Like they got to find a way to keep those three guys on the field along with Alex Highsmith and Joey Porter and Patrick Queen now. But like I don't know. I've been talking a lot with Smitty. I got him fired up the other day because I said I think this defense could be like extremely good. What is your sense of like how good this defense can be? And I'll be honest, like yeah, there's a little bit of question mark at what they're doing in the slot, but man, I don't feel like I need to learn a whole lot about this defense at this stage in the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think just on paper, man, this is a pretty talented defense. Like, I mean, top 10 seems certainly realistic. I think top 5 is within reach. Um, the thing that I think there are some questions that would probably need to be answered before I would go into the truly like elite or dominant category. I think we got to figure out first and foremost, like 2023, like Cam Hayward's performance, still strong as an ox, an extremely impactful run defender, but pretty much non-existent as a pass rusher. how much of that lack of juice or lack of burst off the ball, how much of that is Father Time catching up, and how much of that is the fact that he was not playing at 100%. I lean towards a lot of that being injury related, but I think at his age, I think it's worth saying that, like, hey, we just got to see it before we know for a fact. Now, if he's still that dominant two-way player, where he's still going to be a really good run defender and he's also going to be an impactful pass rusher, if he's still that type of guy, then this defense has a different kind of gear that it can unlock. And even some of the additions with the new guys, man, like I think Patrick Queen, like his athleticism, his range. And I think he's still a guy that's really on the ascending trajectory in terms of what he can potentially become down the line. I'm hopeful that Dante Jackson, if nothing else, he's faster than the guys they had back there last year.
Oh,
And
he's fast.
yeah, and like I think that's going to make it's going to make a difference, in my opinion, that I think a lot of people will see once they get the live action kind of rolling. Because you put a guy like Queen back there, he's a true like 4.4, 4.5 guy. And then you put a guy like Jackson who could still really roll even at his age. And you kind of compare that with some of the guys that were playing last year due to injuries and, circumstances and such forth. And then like the third part of that is, I think that there's, we mentioned a little bit about the possible decline in Hayward. Like the other guys, Watt, Fitzpatrick, and Highsmith, those guys are in their primes. But also, like, what are we going to get from the new guys in terms of like Joey Porter Jr., fantastic rookie season, someone I'm really high on. What's the next step for him? And then like my biggest kind of X factor on defense is probably Keanu Benton. Man, it was tough for me to leave him off. Like I did a top 10 Steelers like entering 2024 list for the site. You guys can go check that out. But I knew that just based on what we had seen so far, I couldn't put Benton in that conversation yet. But man, like I just think from a talent perspective, he's going to be in there sooner rather than later. I think it really just starts with getting him some more reps and allowing him to really unleash and get after the passer, some more third down opportunities where he can really just get those one-on-ones and fire off the ball. But man, like if he takes a step forward, like I really think that he can, this defense can be dang good, man. I'm excited about seeing it come together.
Yeah, and when you talk about Cam Hayward and Father Time, man, like defensive tackles can play a long time as long as you're not asking them to play the whole dang game. Like I think like you can extend how long Cam Hayward is impactful if you have someone that can take some of those reps off his plate.
Right.
I think if Keanu Benton can do that and be an every down guy, and now you only need Cam Hayward, 50% of the time, 60% of the time, man, that starts to look pretty darn good, I think, on that defensive line. And I think that'll help keep Cam healthy and fresh into the season. I'm also very high on Keanu Benton. I think the depth of this defense feels stronger than it has too. Like, if you remember what happened to this defense last year, where at the safety and linebacker positions where they got decimated. And 2 years ago, they lost TJ Watt at outside linebacker. And I look at this team right now, it's like TJ Watt got hurt. I feel pretty okay about Nick Herbig. Like, he's not TJ Watt, but I think he's a really strong young player. I look at the second set of linebackers, and it's Holcomb and Peyton Wilson. Like, that's better than some of the starting linebackers they had the last few years.
Sure. Yeah.
They got the third safety now with Deshaun Elliott. They have some depth there. Trenton Thompson, I think, is a guy that proves some stuff, that he could play in this league if he has to step in last year. Maybe they're not as proven as some of the other guys, but I think there's a lot to like about Corey Trice and Darius Rush. So I think the defensive depth is maybe like as good as that's been in terms of, like, even if they do have some of those injuries, I feel like they're pretty well stocked up to try to have another wave coming. And man, I'm really high on where this defense is right now.
Yeah, I think too with the Sutton signing, just from an on-field perspective, that's probably the area that I think is maybe not getting talked about enough in terms of, like, a lot of people are kind of wanting to throw him in the slot automatically, which is I get it because, like, there's so much unproven there, unknown. But at the same time, like, Cam was really good on the outside 2 years ago. He had a career year that resulted in him getting a payday. Now, things didn't work out in Detroit for several reasons, but I think that you mentioned some of the dart throws that they've got. Corey Trice, Darius Rush, really tall, long, athletic guys that can play on the boundary. Sutton's obviously a very different archetype of corner than that, but he's a guy who's been there. He's done that. So I think that if, say those guys don't work out and you do get an injury, say like Dante Jackson can't stay healthy or something like that, you can kick Cam outside. Like,
Yeah.
you talk about just giving yourselves like more solutions to potential problems. I think in terms of depth, I feel like pretty solid about the depth on defense, with the exception of the defensive line. Like, I have been a little bit maybe like skeptical of Larry Ogunjobi really throughout probably his career. I just think he's extremely inconsistent. But like beyond, like I feel good about the starters. It's just like what behind them do we really have to like get super excited about? We haven't really seen very much from DeMarvin Leal. He's been rather disappointing in my opinion. Kind of in a reserve role. They kind of need a little bit more from him. They lost Armand Watson free agency. They did sign Dean Lowry. Got Montravius Adams back as well. I mean, those guys are fine, but like, defensive line is one of those spots where ideally I think you want to be 5-6 deep. And I'm just not sure that I buy that they are right now. Now, that's why they got training camp. That's why they got preseason. You're going to get a chance to see these guys. Maybe Leal finally takes that jump. They drafted Logan Lee late in the draft as well. Maybe he can provide something, get them some snaps. But when I look at the defensive line and I see like, Ogunjobi's has some health concerns in terms of like he hasn't missed many games, but there's been some talk about like, how often has he even been 100% over the past 2-3 years? And then, with Cam Hayward, his age, getting up there a little bit, wanting to reduce his snap count to keep him a little bit more fresh. Like my concern is like, do they have enough bodies to where they're going to be able to do that? Like I think that Keanu Benton, he 100% needs to be playing like 60-70% of the snaps. I mean, bare minimum. I think last year he was a little bit under 50. I understand the reasons for that. At least at the beginning of the year, he's playing a lot of nose. You got 2 highly paid defensive ends. Like he's not going to play a lot on sub packages. That just has to change, in my opinion, this year. I just think he's a better player than Ogunjobi is, and you need to have him. You need to get him more exposure in some of these like nickel over fronts. But I think that. The question on defense from a depth perspective for me, now that Cam Sutton's in the fold and assuming like his suspension isn't more than like, a month or so, I don't know. I don't even want to speculate really about that. But the defensive line depth is somewhere where I'm looking forward to see how those guys perform in training camp to give us an idea of what those guys can become, but also maybe a position that they could target, once roster cut downs start to happen. Before the regular season kicks off.
Yeah, I think so. I think they have guys that like you can play.
Yeah.
But I don't know that they have guys that are going to make an impact while they play. And like you can hide guys on the defensive line if you have guys making an impact around them. It's just like I think they have rotational guys, but I'm not sure they have true depth. Like if Cam or Larry has to miss an extended amount of time.
Sure.
Like if you're just like, oh, it's a long drive, it's 1st and 10, it's probably going to be a run play. Let's get Lowry and Laudermilk in there. Like, all right, fine. Like those guys can play. Like I got no problem with those guys having a decent sized role. The question is like, if Cam or Larry has to go out for a while, do they have enough to get through? I don't know. It's probably a little more questionable in that regard.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree.
Man, that was, I can't believe 38 minutes went by that fast. That was good talk. Love having you on. We'll have to have it again. Sure. We have to get me, you, and Smitty back together. And actually, we had one commenter that has been routinely asking for all 4 of us to do one together. So I think sometime in the next couple of weeks, we got to make that happen. I know Nick is
I agree. That'd
going
be fun.
out of town, but we got to get that happening here in the next couple of weeks. But tell people what you're working on, what you got coming up, and where they can find your stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's business as usual, man. Just staying busy. But yeah, you guys can follow me if you don't already at Steelers_DB on Twitter and on YouTube. And then all of my written work can be found at SteelersNow.com.
There you go. You can find me at Saunders_PGH on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, SteelersNow.com at PGH Steelers Now. Make sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit that bell for notifications. If you're not listening on YouTube and you're on the podcasting app, leave this 5-star review. And make sure you check out all the work at the website. And we'll have Smitty back tomorrow. Till then, thanks for taking another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.